Welcome to Mastering Agility. If you want to listen to authentic conversations with the most inspiring guests, find like-minded people in the Mastering Agility Discord community, or both online and face-to-face events, this is the platform for you. Grab a drink, sit back, and join professional Scrum trainers Sander Dorr, Jim Sammons, and their guests in an all-new episode.
Welcome back, listeners. This is an episode I've been deficient in recording for a very long time. It's actually embarrassing that it's taken me this long to get this guest on the podcast. So, guest, would you do us the honor of a brief introduction?
Sure. My name is Stacy Oliver. I'm a project manager / agile coach / scrum master / leader / whatever other thing you want to call me. I have all kinds of different things that I do here, and I've known Jim for, I think it's been about 30 years now. So
yeah, and he's got the scars to prove it. So yeah, that's a lot of slashes. And I was just remarking to somebody else today that my 28-year IT career could probably be summed up by the single bullet point: other duties as assigned. I've had a lot of different titles like you. I do a lot of different things in any given week or day or month. But they all kind of fall under some general umbrellas like you rattled off. So to give everyone a little bit of context about why I asked Stacy to finally be on is he's probably the most expert level card player that I have direct access to. And direct access, right? Like I look through my phone, if I search for poker or gambling or with cards and chips and cash, like you're going to be at the top of the list. I'm not lucky enough to have some true pros in my book. So how long have you been playing cards and gambling as a hobby? Let's call it.
I started playing penny poker. My father and uncle taught my cousin and I how to play probably at the age of 11.
Mm-hmm. And what I know about you is gaming in general has been a big part of your life, right?
Oh yeah.
Like what else besides poker?
I mean, growing up, it was baseball, football, basketball, golf, bowling, billiards. Some of those things, went into adulthood, and others didn't. I still golf. I still play billiards, and I still play Texas Hold'em. So.
And I dragged you kicking and screaming along with your wife into some board games a few years ago, before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. So I know many of our listeners, many of the people in our industry are gamers of some sort, whether it's video games. Like you've also been a video gamer for a long time. Like you were one of the first people I knew personally that got into like Counter-Strike and Half-Life and now Call of Duty and other things. And we've sat down at a table and played games like Pandemic Legacy and Ticket to Ride and a couple deeper games. But when I think about you, it's really a mixture of anything with cards and anything that's fun where you can win. Like, would it be fair to say you prefer to win at things in life?
Yes, that would be fair to say.
Okay.
I enjoy winning.
Yes. How do you feel about losing?
I don't really know. Haven't been there. No.
There you go, everybody. There's your first soundbite.
No, losing is a learning opportunity, right?
No, that's not. That's a good phrase. Like one of the things you and I've talked about is, there's different levels of expertise or focus on things. And I just have never had the interest to go all in or go really deep on anything. Like I know a lot of the concepts we're going to talk about today. And at times in my life, I've went deep on billiards and golf and video games and poker. But I just kind of value being a generalist more. But I do find it harms my enjoyment at the time. Like I see that ceiling of as good as I can get. And know that if I want to get through that ceiling to whatever the next ceiling is, I'm going to have to put in a lot of time. I know you've put that time in a lot of things. Do you have any regrets or wisdom to share about kind of like that journey for any of these different activities we're talking about?
I don't think I have any regrets. I think if I was going to like give some advice on like how to go about your journey is know what your limit is in terms of if you're trying to become an expert in something, right, or the best that you possibly can be in something, then make sure you know what your limit of things are, right? So to your point, like you like to be involved in a lot of stuff. I mean, over the years, I know you've had hundreds of hobbies and things that, you enjoy doing. And to your point, you might not be an expert in any of them by choice, right? Because you don't want to put in that work. But if you're like, yeah, well, I want to be an excellent golfer and an excellent poker player, okay, fine. But do you have the ability to handle both of those things, right? Because it's a lot of
Mhm.
work. Some people are going to be able to handle two, some are going to be able to handle three, others are going to be able to handle, one, or maybe even none.
Right. Something I haven't really shared in this podcast yet, but I think I mentioned it to you is I've been asked to be a contributing author of a upcoming book with from Ben Walder on the future of work, and specifically the chapter I'm co-authoring is around the value of being a generalist versus a specialist. So I have just my whole life enjoyed learning a lot of different things, being decent at a lot of things without going all in or focusing on even a handful of things. But it does wear on me. And I've spoken on here many times, and you and I've talked many times. Like, I do sometimes feel like a failure. Like, I'm not as good of a poker player as I'd like to be. I'm not as good at golf as I used to be, even. Like, your skills atrophy. When I was 13, I bet you I could kick your ass at golf today, but not maybe at 13. But now I've gotten way worse. You've gotten way better. And I guarantee it's not even a contest if we go out on the golf course right now. And I've just had to become okay with that. But a lot of the things that I keep coming back to is winning, right? And I'm a fan of a television show or a couple series of shows called Letterkenny and Shoresy, and there's a lot of quotes in there about hockey. And one of the things they say about hockey players is they hate losing more than they love winning. And I think that's humility in a sense, and that's kind of enjoying the taste of victory, but really hating losing and all that. So what I want to talk to you about today is in the genesis of all this is when I was in London last month, I sat down with a couple other PSTs and consultants, and we were talking about game theory and the book Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, who's a professional poker player now turned management consultant. And it is literally on my Mount Rushmore of nonfiction business books. It is one of four that if I had to recommend everybody read, it would be it. And she makes a lot of correlations between work and gambling. And I want to explore a couple of those with you. And so the first question I kind of prepped you on before we hit record is imagine if you were a leader, a boss, man, I don't care what word we use, and you had to log into something, a dashboard, a website, a tool, a phone app, or whatever, and look at a list of everything going on that was in your purview. What are some criteria that you would want all of those things to have so that you could compare them, sort them, so that you knew what actions you want to explore? Anything come to mind right off the rip on that?
The first thing comes to mind is, an answer that you've given to me many years ago, which is it depends, right?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, world.
I mean, because it does. It depends on what am I trying to do? What do I care about? There's a pyramid out there somewhere, and you being the generalist that you are, you're probably going to know the name of it, right? There's this pyramid out there that tells you about the things you value, and some of them are emotional things, and some of them are financial things, and some of them are helping the world, right? So the answer to your question is it depends on what my thing is, right? What my value is. Because if my goal is simply to make money, then it's pretty simple. Just tell me what's going to return the most on my investment. It's the basic thing that I want to know.
Okay.
If it's I'm trying to make the world a better place, then I need a different criteria for my data selection, right? So I need to know, who am I impacting? How am I impacting them, right? What field am I trying to impact them in? So again, it depends, but assuming that I'm just trying to get a return on my investment, I want to know what the highest rate of return is.
Okay. So let's, I love this answer, by the way. And the way I speak about it is there's different types of portfolios. Like if you invest in the stock market, you could have a certain type of portfolio that's made to basically get you to retirement with a certain dollar amount. You could have a high risk, high reward type of portfolio. You could have a real estate based portfolio, and you're going to need different data there. So just to further our future conversation, let's stipulate to everybody listening that there are different types of investments, and you may have a bunch of investments with the same outcome, or you may have a bunch of investments with really different outcomes. So let's focus right now just on I want to make more money. And you said the rate of return. And I know you work with some of the biggest companies out there. So if you were sitting down with one of those, like let's say a PMO director, and they say, hey, these are the 17 projects we've got going on right now, and all 17 of these need to generate some sort of return on investment. What are some data points that you're going to ingest? And just so the audience knows, Stacy has a deep background in business intelligence and data and dashboarding and all that. So I feel able to ask you this question. So what are some things you're going to want to go get from the data lake or from the cluster to start to put in front of that PMO director?
Yeah, I need to know who are the individuals on the teams that are going to be working on this project. Do they all work together? Do they have? I don't want to use. I don't know who's listening is going to know the terminologies, right? But velocity, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to want to know that, assuming that it's a textbook definition of velocity. Let's go with that, right?
Okay.
Let's assume I can get that. If I can get that, that's one thing that I want, so that I know how long it's going to take to get things done for each of these things. So how much is it? Am I going to get on return? And how long is it going to take me to get the project done? And that all stems from knowing who's going to be on the project and what their velocity is. And that's where I'm going to start.
Both Jim and I are experienced consultants and trainers. Therefore, we know how important it is for organizations to have the fundamentals in place before delivering high-value products. And this starts with understanding the theory behind whatever framework, method, or process organizations apply. And this is where Zebia comes in. Zebia is a pioneering software engineering and IT consultancy company, transforming and executing at the intersection of domain and technology to create digital leaders for our people, clients, partners, and communities. As a gift for our Mastering Agility audience, they provided us with a discount code MA10 when signing up for their open enrollment classes to get 10% off. Go to zebia.com/academy to find the entire curriculum of courses. That is Zebia, XEBIA.com/academy to find all their courses.
Okay. So from the list of people on the project, you can get the cost, I assume.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how would you begin to answer the second half of that equation, which is the value? So if we think about a real simple equation, cost on one side, value on another, what's behind the term value for a project, for this mythical project on the list?
What's behind the term value? I mean, I'm thinking it's monetary. It's all the dollar, right?
Okay. All right. So fair. Like if we think about EV in poker, expected value, that equation, I could sum it up by like, these are the potential actions I'm going to take, and these are the potential outcomes of that action. And in poker, it's very constrained. There's only 1 to 4 actions you have at any given time. But in a project or product sense, there's a lot of different actions you can take. So, okay, so let's bring it back to money. But most companies, at least in my experience, maybe your experience is different, and I'd love to hear about this. Is your average PMO director or PMO manager couldn't tell you what the return, what the value dollar amount is for one of those 17 projects. So how do they do that equation if they say, I don't know what the dollar amount is?
I'm not even sure how they would do that if they don't know what the dollar amount is. If your whole goal is to have the highest return on investment, how are you supposed to prioritize anything if you don't know what that potential value is?
Right. Are you seeing people out there at your clients being able to put a dollar amount on something or any sort of a number, even if it's not actually dollars or euros?
In some cases, not entirely. I think the problem that we run into most of the time is we can't determine the dollar amount. We can't base things on what we think the return on investment is because that stuff's, to your point, done by someone else. So if we're trying to prioritize these projects and we don't have access to what the potential return on investment is, then we have to use a whole different value system, if you will.
Okay. And that kind of might lead us to my second question, which is in game theory, and I'm going to just use the term game theory broadly, but thinking about in almost any game that's got a rule set, and think of the rules of a game as a constraint. So if you have a game and it has constraints and rules, there's almost always a strategy you can employ and many different tactics you can employ that have, pros, cons, risk, reward, all that stuff. But there's models out there that basically tell us in this scenario with these inputs, here's what you should do. So in the poker world, what's GTO or game theory optimization?
So game theory optimization is if you have a player who's playing perfectly, if you will. That's game theory optimization for poker. So the problem with this is that it's not possible, right? So we can start at GTO and we can play the best we can at GTO, but nobody in the world can actually play GTO. If that were the case, then they would have solved poker.
Right. Now, when you say playing perfect, tell me what you mean by that.
Playing by all the rules exactly the way they're written.
Okay. But making decisions based on that theory, right?
Yes, but sometimes the decisions are already made for you, right? Like, assuming that there's a right answer, you're just going to follow what that right answer is.
Mm-hmm. So there's probably a lot of non-card players in the audience. So let me throw a real live example at you and to kind of make this point. And I apologize for putting you on the spot, but I think you're going to know these numbers off the top of your head. What's the percentage likelihood that at a 10-person table, someone will be dealt a pair of cards with their 2 whole cards?
I actually don't know that number.
Okay, I think it's like 1 in 11, 1 out of 11. So where the theory and these models kick in is, let me ask a broader question is, if you have a good hand dealt to you, like let's just say you get 2 aces, and most people who've been around poker for more than 5 minutes know that's the best hand you can start with. Do I have the same decision no matter what of any other variable there is at the table?
No, you'll have a different decision. However, if we're talking about GTO, then yes, you will. And one of the things to keep in mind, a lot of people who are familiar with GTO that don't know GTO, and I'm not saying I know GTO by any means, but one of the things that people don't realize is that GTO is for heads up play only. So it does not take into account multi-way pots. Multi-way pot being more than 2 people playing in the same hand. It does not know how to account for that. So anytime that you're in a multi-way pot with someone, you're no longer following GTO.
Got it. Okay, so if we want to apply that to work, it could be seen as if you have one project, one product, here is what you should do. Here's what the the basic strategy, optimized strategy tells you should do given these constraints. But as soon as you add in multiple things, well, your world just got a lot more complex. And also I Googled it. It's 1 in 17.
Okay.
So it's a 1 in 17 likelihood, or 5.88%, that you're going to be dealt 2 matching cards. And this is interesting because, and correct me if I'm wrong or disagree with me as you are quick to do, game theory optimization, or maybe we could even talk about basic strategy in blackjack. It is the statistical best thing to do, but it doesn't guarantee an outcome. So I'm hesitant to call it the right answer. Like if basic strategy, when I sit down at the blackjack table in Vegas or Macau, says, oh, you should split those aces. Well, sometimes I watch TV, I watch the best gamblers in the world, and they don't do that. Same thing with poker players. Sometimes they go against the statistics, the probability, the odds. Why do they do that?
Because they're no longer playing GTO.
Okay.
They're playing they're playing exploitative poker. So I will disagree with what you're saying, because there absolutely is, from a GTO perspective, a right answer. Again,
okay.
But there are assumptions to be made. The assumptions are that your opponent is also playing GTO. So if you have 2 players and they are both playing GTO, there is a right and wrong way to play every hand in every situation. Now, again, well, like I said earlier, no one can do that. No one has the ability to actually do that. So that becomes a problem, which then goes back to what you're saying, which is, even though there is a right answer, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're choosing the right answer, because there's too many to know.
Right.
Right. Now, so when you're starting at a GTO base, then you're going to win based on those percentages, as long as your opponent is playing exactly the same way, GTO, right? But as soon as you start taking into account that your opponent is doing things that aren't GTO, then those percentages mean absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right. So something I've said in this podcast before is, if you think about the games poker and chess, we could debate which one is easier. They both have rules. They both have strategy. They both have tactics. There's probably a right answer to scenarios in both worlds. But poker is what's described as a game of incomplete information, meaning the player, if it's 2 players or 10, no one has all the information unless they're cheating, right? They don't know what cards are coming. They don't know what their opponents are holding, etc. In chess, think of Magnus Carlsen and his opponent sitting across a chessboard. They both can see exactly what's going on. They can see all the pieces, all their positions. They know all the moves, the constraints, if you will. And it very much becomes a mental game played out with physical things. Whereas I describe poker as, it's a game of money played with cards, not a card game played with money. And I think you would agree with that, right?
Yes.
To an extent. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. And the connection to me, in my opinion, there is, it depends on what you have a lot of and what your goals are. If you have a lot of money, your strategy could be different than if you don't have a lot of money. Emotionally, statistics don't change, but the E in EV is expected value. And can you describe just real high level what expected value is when it in the realm of cards or gambling?
Sure. So your expected value is, for a given hand, you expect this to make a certain amount of money based on the strength of that hand.
Okay. Based on all of the potential things that could happen, right?
Most of the potential things that could happen.
Right. Okay. And do you have one expected value number, or does it change?
I mean, it changes. So it will depend on a lot of different things. So if I have a hand, so for example, pocket aces is high EV. I don't even know what the EV is on this. But what I can tell you is pocket aces are going to win 88% of the time, I believe is the number. When your head's up against somebody. As soon as you put a third person in there, then that drops to, I believe, 65%.
Okay.
So your expected value is decreased by the number of players that's in the hand.
Right. Perfect. That's what I expected. And I think, again, non-expert here, it's also based on what street you're on, how many cards have been revealed. The more cards that have been revealed, you have more information. So because poker is a game of incomplete information, and as you get more information, the statistics and probabilities change. So there's a lot of different reactions there. So if we bring this now back to this list of 17 projects, right? And we think about, maybe we have a value score. Maybe we either have a relative score or we have a financial number. Like, if we deliver this project, we're going to save 1.25 million euros. And you talked earlier about the cost of the people, their velocity towards that goal, that's a topic for a whole other discussion. Like, how can people know how they're doing on a project? But let's just say we have some sort of quantifiable thing that says, we know there's 100 steps and we're on step 20, and we can draw a little slope line about how we're going to do. But what else could that be relative to from this poker analogy? Like, how many other projects they're doing at the same time? Is that one?
You mean changing the expected value?
Yeah, like, so we have this project. It's going to deliver 1.25 million euros. Here's our slope with our people. What if those people are working on 3 projects? Is that a variable that we'd have to take into account?
Sure. Yeah, we would definitely want to take that into account.
Okay. I think so. Because, well, at least in my opinion, as you increase the things that people are doing, you also increase the likelihood of a risk or a mistake or a miss or a dependency or something. Same thing with like poker. Yeah.
Yeah, you also decrease the amount of work that person can get done on a single project.
Right. And just like if you and I are playing heads up, I have to worry about you as my opponent and vice versa. But if there's 4 people, now you and I both have to worry about each other, but we have to also worry about 2 other people. So if you think about a list of projects, those other people might be terrible players. They might be contributing to our expected value because they're shitty players and they don't know what they're doing. But they also might do something that crushes our value, or they could beat us, I guess. And I think that's just, I'm not saying that anybody has a portfolio or is playing a game with only one opponent, like in this list of projects, right? So I think one of the data pieces that we'd have to ingest into this mythical dashboard is the people doing this work, how many other things are they doing? And maybe also for this mythical project, how many other things is it dependent on? Because then you've created like this web of dependencies. So the expected value you're going to get, the ROI, if you will, of this project it's not something you can look at, with blinders on. You have to kind of look at what else is going on.
Yeah. I think one of the big problems that we have with this particular analogy here is we have something that we can start with that's explicit in the poker world, right? We can start with GTO, we can start with expected value, and we can go from there. But in our work world, right, I don't even think we have that place to start from, because there is no optimal scenario, right? The optimal scenario is one project, one team, one way of working, done.
Yeah.
Right. That's your base. Anything that you add to that scenario, it changes everything from that point forward. Much like what you're saying as far as like adding variables to our poker situation. How many people are in the hand, whether they're chip stacks, how late are we in the tournament, all of those things that we're going to consider. Same thing goes to our work world, right? If you have one project, one team, one way of working, great. Anything you add from that point forward, it changes everything. Nothing from your base matters, if you will.
So shout out to my buddy Nick Brown from London, who is a coach, and he's put a lot of content out in the world. He's recently written a book, and he's got a lot of LinkedIn stuff. And one of the metrics he captured for years at a large company was, to your point, around like a baseline. And what do we know, and what can we base our future decisions on? And what I forget what the actual term he calls it, but what I call it is feature decomposition rate. So imagine if you're at a big company, thousands and thousands of employees. There's hundreds of projects going on at any given time. And if you're looking at some flow-based metrics, maybe you see a pattern that says, hey, when a feature has 7 pieces, okay, I'm not even going to bother naming the pieces. I mean, many of you know what I'm talking about, right? But we've got this big thing and it breaks down into 7 pieces. And when it's in 7, that's when our ROI is the highest. That's when it goes the fastest. That's when customers like it the most. Whatever your success criteria is. Then you could say, well, of the 100 things we have going on right now, how many of them are in only 2 pieces? How many of them are broken down into 47 pieces? Which doesn't tell you if those things are going to go poorly or not, but it's saying on average, with a statistically relevant data set, like as a company, it seems like when things have 7 pieces, we're the happiest with them. So that's an example, like to me, of if you're having a list of projects that you can use the past at the company to influence what you might do in the future. Have you seen anything like that in your work world, or are you making any mental connections to a gambling or card-based world in that? Either or?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like teams that I've worked with in the past and currently we have baselines that we start with so that we know roughly how much work can get done, your scope and your timeline. For sure. We do that on every project for every team, and we use historical data to determine that.
Yeah. Now, what if I told you that the last time I was at your house playing cards, I played the 7-8 of hearts and I lost a bunch of money. So I said, I'm never playing that hand again. What would you tell me as my friend and poker advisor?
I would say that's a bad strategy.
Why?
Because there is never, I'm going to use the absolute to tell you that there is never an absolute.
I love it.
There is never an absolute when you're playing in a hand of poker. The worst hand of poker is 7-2. Most people know that. And there is a time and a place to play 7-2.
Right. And an opposite story might be is like most card players have a favorite hand, right? I mean, most billiards or pool players have a favorite ball. Like maybe it's an emotional thing, like that time they won $100 from their best friend at a bar by sinking the 7 ball corner pocket or something. How does that kind of emotional pattern sensing of, I did this thing and it turned out great, so I'm going to do it again, how does that relate to poker?
That is called being results oriented. So you have an emotional attachment to the result. So for instance, let's say you're in a situation and you have a hand that you're pretty confident is winning. So you make a very large bet and then you lose. And after you lose, you're like, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. That was a bad decision, right? And so now there's this emotional context to that hand. Like, I probably shouldn't do that, right? That was bad. And the fact of the matter is when you look at the numbers and the statistics and the expected value, you should do that every single time. But because you have this scenario that's causing this emotion, it makes you second guess whether or not you made the right decision. And the opposite of that is true too, right? So, you have a hand, it's a really bad hand, has a very low expected value, might even be negative EV, but you play it anyway, and you make, $400,000 by playing that hand, and you're like, oh my God, I'm playing that hand every single time now.
Yeah.
That doesn't change the fact that it has a negative EV.
Yeah. So to your point, what Andy Duke calls that, I believe, is resulting bias, right? So having a bias to take decisions or future actions based on the result of something that happens. And the other thing you just mentioned for the listeners is called confirmation bias, like believing something to be more than true because you want it to be, or because it has been in the past, right? Like whether it turns out good or turns out bad. And we're humans. Humans are playing chess. Humans are playing poker. Humans are managing these projects, teams, people. And what I would describe this is just because something has worked for your first project doesn't mean you can employ the same tactics and strategy and actions for the next project. Even if all the major variables are exactly the same. I mean, there's still a human component. There's still unknown variables out there. You may want to start with what's worked. You may want to say, well, yeah, I'm not going to ignore my prior success. So I've done this before, but you've got to be ready, I think, to pivot because situations are different. There's a story in a book I just read that I think you would really like. This book, by the way. The book is called Change by David Epstein, and it talks about these. And I'm really going to summarize a whole chapter of this book quickly, but the belief was, can we create chess prodigies? And there is a lot of science and all that went into that. But then the chapter kind of goes into Gary Kasparov and others playing chess computers. And there comes a point where, the computers are winning and they can do all these millions of calculations at a given time and all this. But what the science is telling us is there are types of people that are very good at pattern sensing, pattern recognition and all this. And like they can do that really quickly. They can look at a hand of cards, they can look at a go board, they can look at a pool table, and they can know what the right strategy and tactics are. But there are other types of people, usually people that don't have a ton of experience in that thing, that can make unseen or unknown connections or more tangential connections and say, well, what if you did this? What if you did this? And if I had to sum this entire book up into one concept, it would be there's an immense power in being broad in who you bring to the table and not just bring an expert to the table. Like if you bring a bunch of cardiologists to the table, they're going to find normal cardiology solutions to things, stents, bypasses, all this stuff. If you were to show a F1 driver, a project manager, and a mathematician a cardiac problem, it is highly likely you would get different results, perhaps something that may be seen as non-standard, non-typical, or even innovative from that. And it's funny to know how these games have a series of constraints, moves, and all that, but sometimes different types of thinking upsets the whole system. Like what would happen if a certain type of person sat down at your table that had no clue what they were doing, and everyone else, like let's say the other 8 or 9 seats, were filled with people who knew exactly what they should do in the given scenario? How could that play out?
The possibilities are endless, right? One thing that you will see commonly, and I would say low stakes casual games, right? So let's just say a low stake casual game, and a person who has very limited knowledge of the game sits down, and the other players have knowledge like you described. That player who just sat down will win at a very high frequency for a very short time.
Okay. Now think about a team you work with, Scrum, Kanban, at work or whatever. You got a team of senior developers, and then you inject a fresh out of boot camp school, fresh off the street person with no knowledge of that team and company, and maybe even not much knowledge of the technical domain. Well, how have you seen that go? Same thing as poker. They win for a brief period of time.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they lose right away too. So I've seen situations where new team members have joined a team and have completely turned the team upside down in a positive way. And it's because the team that this person was injected into was mature enough in their roles and in their working together to know that their way wasn't always necessarily the best way. So they gave the new person the opportunity to say, well, tell us what you think should be done different. And they did. And in one case in particular, I recall that this gentleman joining our team and this scenario played out, and he had absolutely no idea how to do the job that he was actually hired to do. But he helped that team immensely because he was able to look at everything from a different perspective than they had and help them make their processes and things better. And then eventually, over time, the senior members of the team got him up to speed on what he needed to do in terms of programming, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
it was a whole new language for him. He had no idea. He was relatively new to programming in general. So
Yeah. I've seen the exact same thing, where new people bring fresh eyes, fresh brains, just, they're not burdened by how we've always done it or the cynicism or apathy that maybe has built up on the team that is beneath the surface. So I want to come back to the poker metaphor for one more example. So there's something called ICM. Can you give us just a layman's overview of what that is?
sure, ICM stands for independent chip model, and it essentially says every chip you have in front of you has a monetary value associated with it. One thing to note, this is used in tournaments. Not so there's two types of poker that's played: cash games and tournaments. Just so for those who are listening, if you're playing the cash game, the monetary value is the actual monetary value that's listed on the chip. But in a tournament, that's not true. You could have a $10,000 chip, but the monetary value of that might be $1. Um, and that's what the independent chip model does. It tells you all the chips in front of you. This is how much they're technically worth.
Yeah. So if you think about like a business, you could use one of your current clients or somewhere you've worked in the past. Do you think they're playing cash game with their projects and products, or are they playing tournament? And let me give you a little bit of a constraint, because I've thought about this a lot more than you have. Is in tournament poker, the way I describe it is you put your money down, you plunk your money down, and then it's an egalitarian playing field. It's very level playing field. Once the money's changed hands, every single player in that tournament is starting from exactly the same spot. And the whole goal is to get all the money, right? But it's very level. In a cash game, how deep your pockets are can drastically change the game. So in business, do you see budgets and leaders of projects and products kind of falling into one of those two categories, or is that not even a useful analogy?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've experienced, I think it's more of a cash game mentality from the different projects that I've been on. Um, the more money that you can invest in it, the, and again, I'm not saying that I agree with this or think that this is a good strategy, but a lot of times I've seen where the more money that you can invest in it, the more you think you're going to get a higher return on your investment, right?
Right. And I've seen both budgeting models. A single person at all of my clients could probably have different types of plays. They may have a certain amount of budget that is, hey, go do this thing for this amount of money. Okay. So they've got a fixed outcome, fixed amount of money, and their job is to make that pay off as much as they can. Sometimes they have another project that is, here's some money, go deliver us some value. And then if they can go back and be like, hey, you gave me this much money and I turned it into this much value. If you give me more money, here's what I can do with it. I would kind of equate that second example to a cash game model, right?
Agreed.
Whereas your investment and the value you're getting is fluid. And at any point, if you don't like your odds or statistics anymore, you can pick it up and either stop throwing money away, or you can walk away and go invest it somewhere else. But I have many people that I work with that are like, I have this much money and I have to get this stuff done. And now those people need different dials to drive by than maybe somebody in the other camp. So in the poker world, what tells you if you should dig into your pocket and pull out another big wad of money and plunk it down in any given evening or weekend, let's say?
You're talking about cash games or tournaments? Like,
let's say cash. Like, let's say it's 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. You're walking through Vegas and you're like, you know what? Or maybe you're already there. You're already in the room at the table, drinks, chips flowing and all that. What makes you go into your pocket again versus, you know what? Let's just call it a night. Let's go up to the room and watch a movie for the rest of the night.
yeah, generally for me, anytime I'm trying to decide on whether or not I'm going to rebuy into a cash game or even rebuy into a tournament, the question that I ask myself is, am I out of this game because of my poor decisions, or am I out of this game because of other people's poor decisions? Right. So,
Oh, tell me more about that.
sure. So if I'm in a poker game and you're my opponent, as we talked about before, I can make great decisions, but you're still going to win sometimes. So I'll break it down in a little example here. If I know that I'm in a situation with you that I'm going to win 70% of the time, I want to put a lot of money into the pot because 70% of the time I'm going to win and 30% of the time I'm going to lose. So, excuse me. So if it's a scenario where this is happening and I'm putting my money in, I'm going to win 70% of the time. The only problem is just so happens to be the other side. It's the 30%. Jim's making a bad decision. He's calling my bets. He's putting money in, even though he's only going to win 30% of the time. If that's what's happening, right? My opponents are making bad decisions, and I'm simply just seeing the bad side of the result. Then I'm probably going to put some more money back in because I know over time the math is going to work out, and I'm going to win 70% of every pot we play, assuming that we're put in that same
Right.
situation, right? Flip side of that is if I'm Jim, right? If I'm the one calling, knowing, oh, I'm only going to win this 30% of the time, I'm probably going to say, no, I'm making really bad decisions, despite the result. So, I mean, that's the key difference here is decisions versus results, right? If the results are
Right.
bad, but my decisions are good, then I'm going to come back and play. But if my decisions are bad and the results are bad, then it's just because I'm playing bad.
So it sounds like you could, in that scenario, you could know or give yourself kind of a mental score about how many mistakes you made. But you can't always control how many other mistakes the other person is going to make. So what the way I describe this is, if I'm going to continue and invest more money, uh, it's based partially on how I'm going to do, what I'm going to do. it's based partially on past performance. Like if I've invested in NVIDIA for 2 years and I made a lot of rate and return, and then I look at, okay, do I have more money to invest? Yes, I do. Okay, and I can. Then what I might look at is, what is the climate? What is the probability of that paying off? And if, NVIDIA is going up and is innovating and doing all this, maybe it's a good move. So if you think about this relation to probability, I would describe kind of what you're saying as, have the conditions of the situation changed in a positive way? Have they stayed the same or have they gotten worse? And that's going to tell me if it's a good decision for me to continue. But all those are guesses. Like Annie talks in her book about, she was observing a game and it didn't go the way the statistics said it would. And the person, was frustrated. And she goes, well, you were an 85%. They said, I think the quote was, I was supposed to have won that. And she goes, no, you were supposed to have won 85% of the time. You just saw one of the 15% of the times that you didn't win. And I know Kanban and all that. And just last week, I was teaching a Kanban class about kind of this expectation. We talk about service level expectation, which is not a promise or guarantee. It's a rolling and moving lighthouse for expectation. Like even an actual lighthouse. If you're pulling into a harbor in a ship and you see a lighthouse flashing its lights at you to go away, it doesn't mean you're going to die. It doesn't mean you're going to crash. It means conditions are very unsafe. Proceed at your own risk. There's a damn good chance something bad's going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
One thing I like about the ICM model is it gives what you have, money in this case, or chips, a value. If we look at a list of projects that your average team or leader or PMO has to do, what's their chip in this scenario? Like usually they're not plunking down actual money. Maybe budget is a way, but what else are they plunking down to say, we're going to bet on this project?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, I'm not saying I'm right, but what I'm saying, what I think is, a boss with a project and a group of people to do it is basically plunking down brain power and saying, I want this group of people to spend their brains working on this problem. So in a way, they're putting money down on the line. They're putting focus down on the line. So they might be saying, don't do this, go do this instead. And it's not always money. Many times the people we're helping are so removed from the actual money, it doesn't feel real to make it. It doesn't feel real to lose it. Would you agree with that? Yeah. So what I would posit is we have to help people think about what it is they're plunking down on the table and shoving into the middle to make a bet.
Yeah.
Because if you don't care about what you're shoving into the middle, the outcome doesn't matter much either, right? If you win or lose and it feels like somebody else's money, or if you win or lose, it doesn't matter at all to you. I don't care how many models or theories or odds charts you have. I feel like at that point, it's not even a winnable game.
Sure.
It's just chance. You might as well go flip quarters in the corner.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's your time and your effort, right? As a person who's working on the project, that's what you're.
Yeah, that's what you're betting.
That's what you're betting. Excuse me. You're putting your time and your effort down on it. It's not necessarily your money, like you said. As a person who's working on the team, I'm not getting the money directly from the success of that project, right? I mean, sure, big scale, large scale, I'm getting it from the company that's paying me, right? But I mean, it's the time and the effort that I'm putting into it as the person working on the project that is what I'm measuring.
Yeah. Well, so just to wrap this up, and I think we've talked about these concepts for quite a bit, but and if I say anything you disagree with or you want to add to, please jump in. But I would say most companies have time, money, and skills. And those are the three things they're shoving into the middle of the table. Sometimes all three, sometimes only one, etc. But whichever one they have the least of is normally the one they value and protect the most. So what I would love to think is possible, and it's what I'm talking to people like you and others about, is if you imagine the next time you're flipping through ESPN and you see poker on TV and you see, hey, there's those people's cards and there's that little percentage, 82%, 91%, 9%. And you're thinking, wow, I wish I could open up my dashboard, my app, my computer, and say, of all the things my team, myself, and others are working on, what's the percentage that they're going to pay off, that I'm going to win? I think that's doable. I think that's solvable. It's not the same math like it is in a game like poker or certain other game or the stock market, right? Like there's not these finite quantifiable things that everyone kind of uses. It depends on what type of game are you playing, what type of products and projects do you have. But I do think it is possible to say, based on what you've told me to consider, based on our past performance, this project is a 24% favorite to win, which means it's 76% it's not going to work out that way. But like I told you the other day when I got you interested in recording this, is thinking in bets, applying to work like this is a bit of a misnomer because we can affect the outcome of these bets. Much more so than a game like roulette or craps or whatever. Like once they wave, no more changes. Like, now you're a victim of chance. We have ways we can step in and adjust our odds of winning all the time. And that's why people like you and I exist. And it's why we do what we do, is to try and increase the likelihood that a bet pays off.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Or do you agree? Or
I do. And it's interesting. I guess the one thing that I would comment on is that throughout our conversation, you mentioned a variable, and it was the same variable you mentioned both in poker and in our work lives, right? Which is humans.
Mm.
And to me, that is the commonality that's most important between poker and what we do, is the humans. Because all of the numbers, GTO, expected value, anything you want to talk about, ICM, like all of that stuff is there. However, none of it matters if the humans aren't doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, right? And that's what it comes down to in our line of work as well. We can say, yes, this has an 85% chance of being a successful project, but that's only if the humans do what they're supposed to do.
Right. And what I would say is, don't give up that power. Don't give up the power of humans to influence the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on. Is there anything, anywhere you want people to come find you? Anything you want to leave us with? Any last words of wisdom? Or you just want to make fun of me and how shitty of a poker player I am?
None of that. None of that.
Okay.
I just want to say thanks for having me on, and I look forward to our next chat.
Awesome. We'll do this again. I have a couple other things I want to ask about. Thank you very much, Stacy.
Yep. Thanks, Jim.
That is all for today. Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, let us know by hitting that like button. Share it with friends and colleagues, sharing a message on LinkedIn, joining our warm and welcoming Discord community, or attend recordings as a virtual audience. You can find all the relevant links in the show notes. We hope you'll tune back in for the next episode of the Mastering Agility podcast.